Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Craig, and I am your host. It is Prosperity Indiana's pleasure to have you participate on today's webinar, Indiana's Looming Housing Crisis. Before I turn over the webinar to Prosperity Indiana's Executive Director, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. We wish to thank today's sponsors, Fifth Third Bank and AARP Indiana. Please be aware that all audio is muted. If you'd like to ask a question, there are two ways to do so. First, you can use the raised hand icon on your screen, and I will call on you to ask your question. Or you may type your question into the question and answer box, which is also located on your screen. We all know that technology can be trying these days, especially while working from home. So if you lose your connection, you may also reconnect using the link emailed to you. And finally, you may access today's presentation and recording later this afternoon on Prosperity Indiana's COVID-19 Resources Hub and the website address noted on the slide. And now I wish to turn it over to Jessica Love, Prosperity Indiana's Executive Director, for some opening remarks. Jessica?
Thank you, Kerry. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. By the packed virtual house on our registration that we have for this morning's event, I know that we haven't just hit on a popular topic. We've hit on something that is a core concern across many sectors, and rightly so. And while the title, Indiana's Looming Housing Crisis, sounds dramatic, the truth is we're bracing for a very dramatic reality, but we are not without hope. Even if we fear the breadth and depths of all the solutions needed are not yet available to meet the expected demand, today's webinar is about amplifying awareness of the resources we do currently have in Indiana and ways to partner to mitigate the eviction cliff that may be looming. So I'm thankful for our team and our partner speakers for pulling together this webinar. We could not do it without our support of our sponsors. Sponsoring today's event, we have both Fifth Third Bank, a supporter of our entire webinar series and Resources Hub throughout the COVID-19 pandemic through a Strengthening Our Communities grant, as well as AARP, a partner in our advocacy efforts and leader with our Indiana Assets and Opportunity Network, who also wanted to be a part of this important conversation today. Thank you to both Fifth Third and AARP for being supporters who have really risen to this occasion. We'll first have Jadira Hoptrees, Vice President and Community Economic Development Manager for Fifth Third Bank Indiana Region, say a few words. Then Manuel Moyo, Director of Community Engagement for AARP Indiana, will welcome you as well. Good morning, Jadira.
Good morning, Jessica. Good morning, everybody here. Thank you again, Prosperity Indiana, for taking the time to put together this powerful and important webinar. Thank you to AARP for joining the efforts. I believe that it's our responsibility as a corporations in the area to support these important webinars and information gathering. And thank you for all of you for taking the time to listen, to continue educating yourself so you can go back to your communities and empower your neighborhoods and communities. Fifth Third will continue to listen and to work with all of you. We understand that the housing crisis, it is and it can become a game changer for us if we don't step in front of it. As supporting your efforts, I want to let you know that I have mentioned in past webinars that we look for opportunities to partner with you to offer financial empowerment. In addition to that, those organizations that we are partnering on webinars or volunteer efforts, we are joining the efforts in providing some funding. Part of my responsibility is to represent the charitable giving for the bank and the foundation dollars. And in this next stage and phase of our response to COVID-19, we're putting a lot more emphasis and focus on foreclosure prevention, financial empowerment, and workforce development to try to be proactive and offer some solutions. So feel free through your chat function or after the webinar to reach out to me if you would like to discuss this further. With that, thank you, everybody. I look forward. I'm planning to stay through the presentation to learn about what our community partners can offer us and hope to hear from many of you after the webinar. With that, Carrie, I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Jadira. And now we have with us Mandela Moyo, Director of Community Engagement for AARP Indiana. Mandela?
Good morning, Carrie, and good morning to everybody, and welcome to this important conversation regarding Indiana's looming housing crisis. Thank you, first of all, to our friends and colleagues at Prosperity Indiana for hosting today's webinar, and most importantly to you and Fifth Third Bank for your commitment to finding common sense solutions to Indiana's looming housing crisis. As already mentioned, I'm Mandela Moyo, Director of Community Engagement for AARP Indiana. We represent a little over 825,000 members here in the Hoosier State. And our goal is to make those communities more livable, meaning communities are protecting and expanding the availability of affordable, accessible, and safe housing. This cannot be more valuable now as individuals and families face the impacts brought on by COVID-19. As you all know, COVID-19 has exacerbated a number of disparities in affordable housing, potentially even adding to the complexity of addressing it. The pandemic has made affordability even more pressing, and an unprecedented unemployment spike and more job losses, and a surge, obviously, in missed mortgage payments and rental payments as well, has increased the threat of evictions and also, quite frankly, foreclosures. For many in the housing space, and many of you on this webinar today, there is a genuine fear to the end that the end of especially eviction moratoriums could plunge thousands of people into homelessness. And to that end, we obviously want to, thank Governor Holcomb for extending his executive order to protect tenants from eviction due to COVID-19 through the end of July. And this important step gives renters a brief reprieve from the threat of evictions. And it is my hope that today's conversation will lead us to tangible solutions to solving the housing crisis we faced well before COVID-19. And so although we've all sort of been dealing with and faced with COVID-19, the solution to it is important that we pay close attention to communities that are hardest hit. This will allow us to ensure we implement policies that both address the impacts and the current crisis and make future ones less severe, particularly on people and communities that have been hit hardest, including communities of color. COVID-19 can also mark the beginning of a new era for all of us to build towards future work, to avoid as many of the foreseeable problems as we can, and even solve some of the perennial ones. So thank you again to Prosperity Indiana for hosting this important conversation. And it is my hope that each of you are sparked to move and change in the areas and spaces that you each represent. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the webinar this evening.
Thank you, Jadira and Mandela, and thank you again to our partners at Fifth Third Bank and AARP Indiana for making today's webinar possible. For more than 30 years, Prosperity Indiana has mobilized members to create economic opportunities and improve social conditions, particularly for Hoosiers who are most disadvantaged. As a statewide cross-sector membership network of approximately 200 organizations and individuals, Prosperity Indiana's impact through members has strengthened communities and improved lives in rural, suburban, and urban areas in every county. It is our mission to build a better future for our communities by providing advocacy, leveraging resources, including providing training and consulting services, and engaging an empowered network of members to do the important work. Our members represent human services, the arts, legal aid, congregations, workforce development, real estate, health services, financial institutions, philanthropy, all levels of government, community action agencies, private and nonprofit affordable housing developers, and economic development organizations, and more. If you are not a current member, please go to prosperityindiana.org to learn more. I would like to now introduce our first speaker, Matt Rayburn. Matt is the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Real Estate Development Officer for the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority. The Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority believes that growing Indiana's economy starts at home. Everyone can agree that all Hoosiers should have the opportunity to live in safe, affordable, good quality housing in economically stable communities. That's the heart of IHCDA's mission. The IHCDA's charge is to help communities build upon their assets to create places with ready access to opportunities, goods, and services. IHCDA promotes, finances, and supports a broad range of housing solutions from temporary shelters to home ownership. Welcome, Matt.
Well, thank you, Carrie, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. As we've heard, a very timely and important topic on the need for rental assistance throughout our communities. I've been asked today to present on just one of a variety of programs that IHCDA is currently working on in response to COVID. In particular, the COVID-19 rental assistance program that many of you are aware Governor Holcomb announced about 2 weeks ago now. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes this morning and just give a very high-level overview of that program. And then, of course, we'll be happy to answer questions as they arise. Carrie, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So what I'll be talking about this morning is $25 million from Indiana's discretionary CARES Act funds that have been authorized to use for a rental assistance program. So that $25 million is being transferred from the state of Indiana to IHCDA to administer as a rental assistance fund, with the goal of improving housing stability and preventing evictions. Now, as I mentioned, IHCDA is administering a variety of other programs as well. Some of you may be familiar that we are using Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG HUD funding, as some COVID response emergency rental assistance as well. I'm not going to focus on that program today, but please be aware that we also have that major program as well. So we're trying to bring a variety of resources to the table around rental assistance. Carrie, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so what I'd like to start with for this $25 million of the discretionary CARES Act funding, talking about who are the eligible households that can receive the rental assistance. And the first thing I want to note here is that this is an entirely online application process, and a household can apply beginning next Monday, July 13th, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. There's no set deadline or due date for the application, but we do anticipate the funds will all be utilized. So we recommend tenants apply as soon as possible to ensure that rental assistance is available for them. But anytime after 9 a.m. next Monday, they can apply. And the application goes through indianahousingnow.org. Some of you are already familiar. That's an existing web platform that IHCDA has utilized for well over a decade as a housing locator service throughout the state. And since that website already has a good reputation and has a lot of tenant traffic on a day-to-day basis, we're utilizing it for this online application purpose as well. So when the household goes to indianahousingnow.org, they will be submitting an online application that will screen them all online for their eligibility under the rental assistance fund. And there are really four primary categories that the individual has to meet in order to be eligible. First, they have to be an Indiana renter household who lives outside of Marion County. Marion County did receive its own direct allocation of discretionary CARES Act funding and is establishing a $15 million program for Marion County. So our $25 million will cover the other 91 counties, and additional information will be made available through the city on how the Marion County program is going to operate. So if you are an Indiana renter household outside of Marion County, the next test is that you have to have experienced a loss of income due to COVID-19. So that could be something like an involuntary job layoff, a reduction in work hours or pay, et cetera. And basically the test here is that you're demonstrating that current household income, including your unemployment, is below your household income prior to March 6th. March 6th being the date that Governor Holcomb declared a state of emergency for the state of Indiana. So unlike most traditional HUD rental assistance programs, there is no true income limit. This is not tied to an area median income. We're not running a full, many of you are familiar with the HUD Part 5 or the Section 8 methodology of verifying all income and assets. That is not the case in this program. This program is a self-certification from the household of their loss of income. So again, it's all about a change from where they were before March 6th to where they are now in income. And then if they do have that loss of income, they also have to then certify that because of that loss of income, the household is now rent burdened and or at risk of a termination of tenancy related to non-payment of rent. And then the final test is related to duplication of benefits. So the household must not currently receive another federal source of long-term rental assistance. So common sources such as Section 8, whether that's tenant-based housing choice vouchers or project-based Section 8, USDA rural development assistance, or someone who's living in a public housing unit, just as examples. And really here, we know under those federal programs, tenants receiving those long-term federal subsidies are not allowed to take other forms of rental assistance. Now, we know there could also be households that have received some type of short-term rental assistance, whether that's they went to the township trustee's office and got a month of assistance. We know some communities have established small rental assistance funds. That by itself will not disqualify a household. The requirement is just that we're not going to pay out of the rental assistance fund for any months that they received that assistance. So this would be for different months. So someone could have received a small local short-term rental assistance prior to getting on our program, or once they're on our program and the assistance ends, they could then get local assistance after. We're not saying you can't end up getting both, you just can't get both for the same months. Next slide, please. All right, so if a household is deemed eligible, the next question then is, well, what do they get? What is the assistance? So a household is eligible for up to 4 months of assistance, and that 4 months can be any combination of previous months. So here we're talking about arrears, late fees that have accrued, et cetera, or future months, which would be more of a traditional rental assistance program. For any month, any of those 4 months, the total assistance to the household cannot exceed $500. So therefore, they would have a total benefit not to exceed a total of $2,000 under the program. The only caveat here being, of course, if someone was living in a unit where the contract rent was less than $500, if the lease defined rent is $400, we would then cap it at the amount due under the lease. On the arrears side, arrears payments can go back and cover past due rent that is accumulated on or after April 1st, as well as late fees. With the federal restrictions on this funding, while it is very flexible, we do have to show there's a direct correlation to the funds and a COVID-19 response. So arrears or late fees that were older than that, we cannot demonstrate were a direct result of the pandemic. And then kind of the final note I'll mention here, as with most rental assistance programs, IHCDA will be making a payment directly to the landlord on behalf of the tenant. This will not be a check to the tenant in the form of some type of stimulus payment. Rather, it's direct payment for rent to the landlord. The only difference here than traditional rental assistance programs is rather than paying a monthly amount and ongoing claims, the landlords will all be paid in a one lump sum payment from IHCDA that covers a combination of past and future rent. All right, we can go to the next slide. Just quickly, a few things that are ineligible, just to clarify. So as I've already said, this is a program for current renters, really about maintaining housing stability. So this program is not for mortgage assistance for homeowners. If a homeowner tries to apply, they'll be directed to the 877 Get Hope hotline or website, which is the state's hardest hit fund, our existing program for foreclosure prevention. This is not for assistance for persons currently experiencing homelessness. Again, these are current renters that are under a lease. If someone goes to the indianahousingnow.org website and indicates they are currently homeless, they will be connected through the continuum of care system to their nearest regional lead to be connected with coordinated entry and with the appropriate homelessness assistance resources. On the arrears and late fees, as I said, it can't be for prior to April 1st. And then once we make a payment towards arrears, if the household falls behind again and accrues future months of arrears or late fees, the fund will not cover those. It will just cover what we are paying at the time of the agreement. And then this program does not offer utility assistance, security deposit assistance, or payment for any damages that the tenant may cause. Next slide, please. All right, so one thing we wanted to make sure to do with this program was to ensure that the tenants do receive some protections, and that we're not sending a $2,000 payment to a landlord and then the tenant being evicted, the next day. This really is about housing stability. So we are requiring that every landlord and tenant under this program executes an IHCDA created rental assistance fund addendum to the lease that we will be providing. This addendum really provides two primary protections for the tenant. So that the lease addendum lasts for a period of 4 months, regardless of when the assistance is. So remember, the household could take all 4 months of its assistance as arrears, but the term of the addendum and the tenant protections is 4 months going forwards from the date the tenant and the landlord execute. So the first protection here is that during that 4-month term of the lease addendum, the landlord cannot assess late fees and cannot evict or otherwise try to terminate tenancy related to non-payment of rent until such time that the household is more than 45 days delinquent on their rent portion. And in the lease addendum, there will be a table that identifies, here are the months that are covered under the lease addendum. Here's the tenant's portion due. Here's IHCDA's payment portion. And if at any time the tenant is more than 45 days behind their portion of rent, then the landlord could proceed with a termination. And in talking with landlords and some associations, we know that realistically, in most cases, a landlord is proceeding with a termination for non-payment of rent more like 10 or 15 days after a payment is due. So it's our hope that this is adding probably at least 30 days of some extra time for a tenant to catch up before the tenant can try to proceed with a termination. And then the second protection that we don't want the tenants to be price gouged solely because they have rental assistance. So during that 4-month term of the addendum, the landlord cannot increase contract rent without notifying and receiving approval from IHCDA. And really the only situation we would approve would be if the lease is renewing during the term of the addendum and the landlord can demonstrate that all tenants are receiving an increase at lease renewal. It cannot be related to something specific to the individual that has rental assistance, and it cannot be during an existing lease term. Next slide, please. All right, so as we wrap up, the final slide I have and the final main topic is just how we are administering this program. So IHCDA has contracted with a network of statewide partners who are going to help us administer the program. And this network consists of 3 types of entities: community action agencies, public housing authorities, and township trustee offices. So local organizations that are already committed to serving vulnerable individuals in their communities, that are often providing short-term rental assistance or in some cases long-term rental assistance programs already. Those providers, now what they will not do, they are not determining the eligibility of the households or filling out the application process. Again, that's all done online. Households are screened through our online system and then sent to a provider. When the provider gets that person, they just immediately begin working with them and their landlord. And basically the provider is the liaison between IHCDA and the landlord. So they will execute an agreement with us, outlining their responsibilities. They will then work with the applicant and the landlord to gather the lease documentation, proof of any arrears, et cetera, and then to make sure that lease addendum is executed. And once that's executed, the provider will work with the landlord to make sure we have payment information, the W-9, et cetera, so that IHCDA can quickly issue payment directly out to the landlord. So in closing, what I'd really say as far as next steps and what we need from many of you on this call is just to continue to help us promote the program. Again, we are now 6 days away from program launch. We'll be launching some additional marketing and communication tools over the next few days to really get the word out. But our goal is to make sure we are getting a diverse audience geographically and demographically across the state. So we ask you and your organizations, please help promote the program. Make sure that tenants across the state are aware of this, that they know to go there next Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and to submit their applications. If you go to indianahousingnow.org right now, you'll see a banner at the top saying, coming soon, the application. There are already there one-pagers in both English and Spanish explaining the program to landlords, a separate one-pager that explains explains the program to tenants. And either today or tomorrow, we will also then be posting there a PDF that just shows here are the questions you'll be asked when you go into the online application, so that individuals can have their information ready and know what questions will be asked of them. So with that, I will turn it over, but I'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Matt. And we do have several questions which we will ask towards the end of the webinar. Now I'd like to introduce Brandon Beeler, who is the Director of the Housing Law Center at Indiana Legal Services, where he represents low-income clients in rental housing matters, as well as identifies and litigates statewide systemic issues related to Hoosier tenants. Mr. Beeler began his advocacy for low-income tenants by being selected to work as part of a grant funded by Equal Justice Works and AmeriCorps as a tenant engagement and community economic development legal fellow, where he worked with public housing tenants in projects undergoing the rental assistance demonstration conversion. Prior to joining ILS, Mr. Beeler served as a law clerk for the Honorable Richard L. Young in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Indiana. Indiana Legal Services is a not-for-profit law firm and the largest provider of civil legal assistance to eligible low-income people throughout the state of Indiana. ILS helps clients who are faced with legal problems that harm their ability to have such basics as food, shelter, income, medical care, or personal safety. Most of the cases ILS handles are cases such as family law, where there is domestic violence, housing, consumer law, access to health care, and access to government benefits. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you, Carrie. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Prosperity Indiana for leading these conversations, and these are really important, and ILS is very honored to be part of them. So getting into today, we're going to talk a little bit about, and sorry, Carrie, you go to the next slide, thank you. Really briefly, going to cover the moratoria, both in Indiana and in the federal eviction moratorium. They're a little bit confusing, and I think just kind of I'll quickly run through those, because probably I assume most people on the call are aware of those, but just to kind of keep some dates in mind, and then kind of go into some current tenant advocacy, including working with different community groups and state and local government groups as well. Next slides, please. So starting with Indiana's eviction moratoria, the way we talk about it is as a pause, and that kind of helps our clients, which are the tenants and renters, kind of think about it in a way that, well, right now, no legal action can be taken, but, to remind tenants that they are still legally obligated to continue their duties under the lease. So just to kind of, again, point out some dates, it was initiated by Governor Holcomb on March 19th, 2020. As of the 30th of June, it was extended through July 31st, 2020. And at this point, I just like to always kind of remind folks of the governor's language when he initiated the moratorium. And what Governor Holcomb said was that no residential eviction proceedings or foreclosure actions may be initiated during the public health emergency. And the key word there we pick up there is on may be initiated. At ILS, we view that as any initiation being even sending a notice to quit to a tenant or any sort of steps of self-help. In order to try to initiate some sort of eviction, either legally or not legally, as being part of a violation of the Indiana's eviction moratorium. And again, Indiana tenants are still obligated to pay rent during this time. Next slide, please. So again, in the most recent executive order related to Indiana's eviction moratorium, it was extended. And one thing that we really appreciate, and we saw that Governor Holcomb put in his order, was a directive and encouragement for landlords and tenants to work together to establish repayment plans. As we've just discussed earlier, with the rental assistance program soon to be launched next week, tenants need time and need some grace in order to get to the point where maybe they can find the resources either through rental assistance through through government and aid or through private rental assistance. So we really appreciate that language and really want to kind of always remind folks that this was a part of the most recent executive order. Soon I can speak that the Indiana Supreme Court has commissioned a landlord-tenant courts task force to offer suggestions to the Indiana Supreme Court on how landlord-tenant courts should reopen, again, with a focus on maybe giving tenants time to, again, as Matt just said, maybe to learn about rental assistance programs that are available to them that they may not know about. And so part of that also is to encourage maybe the courts who hear eviction hearings to help also be a source of providing information so tenants can hopefully get the resources and financial, frankly, resources they may need to be able to keep and maintain their rental housing. Again, we also encourage community leaders to work with tenants and assisting in making payment plans. And from our office's standpoint, I believe, hopefully from a statewide standpoint, we're going to start offering some forms that may make it easier to begin the conversation for tenants and landlords to open up some such ideas or such programs. Next slides, please. So this is where a little bit of confusion has kind of come into place. So there's actually two sort of, I guess the way to think about this is two sort of federal eviction moratoria happening right now. The first one was on March 18th when HUD issued an eviction moratorium that was limited to FHA insured properties and FHA insured single family properties. That I'll talk about a little bit later, but the big one that we all are kind of aware of is that on March 27th, when Congress passed the CARES Act, this implemented a federal eviction moratorium to certain covered properties. And also as part of the CARES Act moratorium, there's additional notice provisions or due process protections that are included that I'll briefly cover. Next slides, please. So Carrie, you can kind of, this is, I did a comprehensive list of all the programs that are covered under the CARES Act moratorium. So these are the common programs, the most common ones we kind of hear about, especially in urban areas, which are public housing, Section 8 HGCV, project-based, and the LIHTC program, which we'll see. So Carrie, you can probably go to where I say CARES Act eviction moratorium. This is just an exhaustive list, and if anyone wants a copy of this, I'm happy to provide that as well. Thanks. So the CARES Act moratorium, again, is at this point still extended and expected to expire, set to expire on July 25th. I know there's been some rumblings in Congress to try to get that extended, but this is for the CARES Act covered properties. Again, the CARES Act moratorium is limited to non-payment of rent actions, so landlords cannot file non-payment of rent claims during this time. In addition, it does prohibit landlords from charging fees or penalties that are related to the non-payment of rent. And it's just important to remember that. And again, when talking with landlords are trying to figure out what they're entitled to. Next slide, please. And again, a part I just want to kind of highlight that kind of sometimes gets overlooked besides the prohibition on filing rent or filing eviction or charging fees is that the CARES Act also includes a 30-day notice requirement. This is, again, the point here is to give tenants time to maybe find some assistance or find some resources to help them be able to cure the breach. So at this point, the way that is at this point, so July 26th would really be the first day the landlord could give a notice to quit based on non-payment for a CARES Act covered property. And again, this is a due process issue. This is giving tenants notice and time before taking away their protected property interest, which is their rental homes. Next slide, please. So HUD extended their eviction moratorium, kind of the first one we talked about that they came out on March 18th. So on June 17th, HUD extended the FHA insured property moratorium through August 31st, 2020. So the best way, and one of the first resources I kind of point to people, and there are many, and feel free to reach out at some point if you guys want to know, if anyone wants to know more. But the National Low Income Housing Coalition has a very comprehensive database of properties that receive FHA insured mortgages. A lot of them are surprising that the properties that you may not normally think are covered under this moratorium are. And if you go to the next slide, I just kind of put an example. So if you go to that website, you can see, sorry, next slide. Oh, sorry. That's really what it looks like. And you see on the right-hand side there, you can look by city and ours look by zip code and kind of do a control find situation to see if a property is covered under the FHA mortgage properties moratorium. Next slide, please. So currently, if there are landlords that are maybe allegedly violating the eviction moratorium, the tools we're giving to tenants at this point that we know about is the Indiana Attorney General back in late March set up a consumer complaint for tenants if landlords were taking actions to either file evictions, and also if the landlords, as Governor Holcomb said, initiated the eviction. So a notice to quit, whether verbal or written. The Indiana Attorney General wants to hear about it and would like or encouraging tenants to file, at least start the process by filing a consumer complaint there. Of course, we encourage tenants, especially qualifying tenants, to contact attorneys or legal aid providers if they have questions about their rights or about the moratorium, or if their landlord is taking any sort of action during this time. And also local and state bar associations have really ramped up. I've been in a lot of conversations with them, have ramped up their resources and access to attorneys, including a lot of attorneys who have agreed to go pro bono and in answering different questions, and hopefully, trying to get information out to tenants, as many tenants as we can reach. And again, if a court case is filed and the court case, which it shouldn't be, but if the court case is filed and goes to a judge, is just to remind the judge that we are currently in an eviction moratorium. It's here in Indiana until July 31st. Next slide, please. So, and then kind of bringing this back to where we are here and talking about community involvement and community groups and what we can all do in working together. We really encourage, if you have a tenant who's having an issue with a landlord or is concerned about non-payment and still searching for resources that they may be entitled to, is to really, to reach out and feel free to talk to landlords and try to help tenants be that advocate to try to get to some of these repayment plans and things that they can just get in writing and get sort of some security about before the moratoriums end. This doesn't take a legal mind to do. I mean, any community groups can do that, and just sort of kind of helping tenants have the tools and the confidence to approach that. And obviously we'll just kind of cover, because it was covered so great by Matt a few minutes ago, to reminding that there are now rental assistance programs that are being launched now. IHCDA's rental assistance program that he covered, and I know there's the emergency solutions grant as well. In Marion County, again, why it's excluded from the IHCDA program is due to the fact the city of Indianapolis is going to be launching their own rental assistance fund, and CHIP as well is also going to be offering some rental assistance as well. Here in Marion County, and I believe that Fort Wayne and Evansville, I believe, are on a quick track to try to get similar programs. We have in Indianapolis a tenant hotline. This is a number that operates, I believe it's a general 8 to 5, that will connect a tenant to have any questions or having issues with regarding their rental housing, to connect them to our program in our office to hopefully give them some advice and potential representation. And we also have the Tenant Legal Assistance Project and Eviction Avoidance Project. I can say also that like a lot of things we've been doing right now is trying to work with different community groups. So I know that here in Indianapolis, there's a lot, and we've been doing a lot to try to just provide whatever support they need or guidance from what we hear, issues that are happening on the ground. Again, Fort Wayne and South Bend, I know attorneys and leaders in those offices are working with local community groups and regional community groups to help develop programs and assistance for tenants as well. From that note, I can just say we also strongly encourage any community groups or local government groups, or even landlord or property management companies that would want to maybe work on this solution, to reach out to us. We're happy to work to find positive solutions for everybody. I also will say that we are fortunate to have a housing social worker in our office who is feverishly working to get out materials and publications that we obviously will share with our office, but we will happily share with community partners and make them widely available. So some examples of things we have at this point: we have an Indiana Renters' Rights and Responsibilities form, rental assistance and resources form that sort of help with maybe housing placement and other forms of assistance, township trustee assistance information. She did a deep dive into IHCDA's rental assistance program and have both an English and Spanish versions of sort of instructions and guidance for how to submit an application and help ensure that if they qualify, that they transparently qualify to the IHCDA program. And we also are working on, and hopefully we'll launch in the next few weeks, private sources of rental assistance for every county in Indiana, even if there's only one source. And I can finally, I guess the next slide is just as a little plug and flyer for our help desk that we are operating in Marion County. It's every Thursday from 11 to 1 for the month of July. Tenants can call and get directly speak with an attorney who's been trained in this area and also been trained in different COVID-19 related issues and advocacy and another source resources. I want to be clear that a tenant does not have to have an eviction filed or have a landlord saying, I'm going to evict you. A tenant can call this just with a simple question and just wanting some guidance. So if you know any tenants in Marion County, encourage them to call this number. And with that, I think we can probably go to the next slide or end it with, this is sort of a summary of it all. And hopefully that was, I know that was a lot of fast information, but I'm happy to answer questions at the end or, feel free to reach out to me at any time if I can be of any help. So thank you again, Prosperity Indiana, for leading these great conversations.
Thank you, Brandon. Pam Brookshire is the Vice President of Community Services at Community Action of Northeast Indiana and Fort Wayne, which does business as BrightPoint. Pam has directed the Community Services Department at BrightPoint since 2000 and is responsible for all BrightPoint programs with the exception of Head Start and Early Head Start. She co-authored the Family Development Matrix, an assessment tool and case management system that has been adopted by all community action agencies in Indiana and many more organizations across the state. Pam has also provided leadership on many homeless, housing, and case management projects, including development of community-wide case coordination system. BrightPoint is a private nonprofit agency that promotes economic and community development by providing resources, helping people gain access to opportunities, and teaching them the skills they need to become self-sufficient. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you, and thank you, Prosperity Indiana, for having me on this panel. I'm very honored to be here. Good morning, everyone. I believe that my task is to talk about what BrightPoint is doing to address the needs of community members who are facing eviction and or being behind in their rent during this particular time. As many people know, that right at the beginning of COVID, all of these community members came together and wanted to to address these issues, and all this money came pouring in, and but then all of a sudden all these moratoria came along too, and though we were all prepared with funds, we weren't really seeing people because they didn't have to pay their rent, or they didn't think so because all the moratoria came in and said they would not be evicted for this certain period of time. So we have been working feverishly in Northeast Indiana as well to try to organize and different community organizations to address these issues and to be prepared for the surge. We are working with the Indiana Legal Services branch, I guess is the best way to put it, up here in Fort Wayne. The city of Fort Wayne has provided BrightPoint with $200,000 to work with Indiana Legal Services to help address the surge when it hits, so that we can help any clients that ILS sees, they can refer to us and we can help make financial arrangements with landlords so we can stop any evictions that come along once the moratorium lifts and we start addressing these issues. I was glad to see the 30-day notice was put into place, because I'm afraid some people believe that, once the moratorium are lifted, then they're going to be out on the streets right away. We've also received funding from our local United Way to also address other COVID-related issues, not just housing, but as we all know, housing is the #1 issue that all of our constituents face, and we deal with that on a daily basis, not just during COVID emergencies. That is the #1 request that we receive in our organization, even though as a community action agency, most people know us for energy assistance program. We still deal with multiple rental requests, housing requests on a daily basis, and it's really nice to have all the support in place so that we can address these issues. I just wish we had all the support in place every day so that we could help people deal with their housing crises, because these are everyday crises and not just COVID crises. We are also using our Community Services Block Grant. As a community action agency, we receive Community Services Block Grant every year, CSBG funds. And of course, there are CARES Act CSBG funds that are coming as well. And we have we are setting aside those funds to deal with housing situations as well as utilities. We are hoping to do car repairs, car payments, anything that's going to keep people from getting back to work and achieving some level of financial stability that they had before the crisis hit. We expect to be dealing with people who may not have been receiving our services before because they were fairly stable before the crisis, but then lost their job or had a reduction in hours as the crisis hit. So now all of a sudden they find themselves in need. So we are busy organizing. We have been selected as an ESG hub for Region 3. So we're anxious to figure out what our role, though we know what our role will be, how we're going to work that out. So we'll learn more about that this afternoon, as I have been told. So we have mainly been doing is putting together all of these funds that we have received, organizing them, figuring out who's eligible for what county is eligible for what county we think we can serve with any kind of capacity, and then getting staff up and running so that we can provide services to these families in an efficient and fast manner. We are prepared for the surge, and my concern is that every time it is extended, it is causing just that much more hardship for the families that we are going to see. Their bills are just racking up, and they will owe thousands and thousands of dollars by the time the moratoria are lifted, and it just won't be what they owe landlords and perhaps their mortgage companies. It will also be what they owe utility companies. So our communities need to be prepared that it's just not going to be the typical $500 payment here or $700 payment there. They need to know they're going to have to add some zeros to those amounts, because those are the figures that we're going to absolutely see. As a community action agency, we also, provide child care development fund assistance. We have a small child care, I don't want to call it a program, but assistance that our local United Way provides for us as well, that we usually use for families that are on the CCDF waiting list, or teen parents that we're trying to keep in school, or we just use it for some flexible child care that we just don't have the opportunity to use with CCDF. So we're kind of seeing some of those dollars being put to use as families can't get back into their regular child care facility because either they're not open or they're open at half capacity and they can't get their child back in. So, what this crisis has taught us is that we need to be as flexible and as willing to bend the rules as far as they possibly will go, so that we can really address people's needs and not what some bureaucrat feels the needs are. Like I said, I wish we could have all the support that we are getting right now on a day-to-day basis, and I really think we could make huge strides in eliminating poverty and at least meeting people's basic needs on a more humane level than we currently do. But maybe before my time is through, we'll absolutely see that, because I don't think that whatever normal was before COVID hit, that we will return to that in any way, shape, or form. So hopefully the way we provide services will also change along with that. I don't know that I covered everything, but I'm certainly open to questions and would be happy to speak with anyone. Again, I thank Prosperity Indiana for the opportunity to speak with all of you, and I wish us all a great deal of luck and Godspeed and when the moratoria are lifted, and that we all continue to work together and have conversations like this so that we can support one another and that we can proceed with rapid change as we need to when we see things aren't working or that we need to make change. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. So we're going to move into questions now, and we have quite a number of questions, which I will read and allow our presenters to respond. The first question asks, do you know if the statewide renter assistance program will be available to those who own mobile homes but still pay lot rent? I'll let Matt or Brandon take that.
Yeah, hey, this is Matt. So we have not within this program intentionally excluded any type of housing. The caveat is that there does have to be some type of lease agreement because we have to verify the monthly amount due and have to be able to execute that lease addendum. So we do know, unfortunately, that there are some renters in the state who are not renting under a true lease, and that's really the only situation we anticipate not being able to assist. So as long as there is a landlord who's willing to enter into that lease agreement and there is a lease that we can review, we are open to any type of rental housing.
Thank you, Matt. The second question is, the state does not currently allow local CARES Act funding to be used for rental assistance. Will this policy be changing?
I don't understand that question, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't either.
Mark Brinson, if you're available, would you perhaps like to ask your question? We find Mark here. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the question was about the discretionary CARES Act funding the state receives, and they're dispersing that to local communities. Each community has an allocation, and we've been told that that funding cannot be used for rental assistance, although that's how the state is funding their rental assistance program. So just curious if that was a policy that's being reviewed now.
Thank you, Mark.
My guess is that none of the panelists are aware of that policy or involved with that. So I think, unfortunately, we don't have an answer there. Not sure if anyone at Prosperity is aware of this issue.
This is Jessica. We're happy to look into that and connect. So I think I'd heard hints that the individual allocations couldn't be used in that way, and had seen questions. I think that's an Indiana imposition, but we'll double check and be able to get that answer if you don't have it, Matt.
Okay.
Regarding other sources of rental assistance, if someone received $50 from a local community organization in June for rental assistance, but still owed $400 in rent arrears for June, they would not qualify for June rental assistance from the RFA program? Is that true?
Yeah, so that is unfortunately correct. So the RAF rental assistance program would cover months that they have not received any rental assistance for. So if they did receive local rental assistance in June, then the RAF assistance could then cover the next 4 months. So the program is open to which 4 months are covered. Again, whether those are it could be all arrears, it could be a mix of arrears and forward, it could be all forward facing. But in that case, if the tenant had some type of local assistance, and we understand that may be only a small portion, then in that case, that tenant's RAF assistance would start probably in July as their first of 4 months.
Next question. If the $500 a month is not enough assistance, are they not allowed to seek additional funds from community organizations? Additionally, if there's only one participating provider in a particular county, does that limit the amount of assistance residents can apply?
Okay, so I think those are two separate questions. So the first one, I believe, is more
Sure.
like the question that was just asked. So the answer is yes. The prohibition is that you cannot receive another form of rental assistance for the same month of which you are getting the RAF assistance. And we do know, in most cases, the $500 is not going to cover full contract rent. Median rent in Indiana is $815, so the $500 a month is only a partial payment. But the rental assistance fund would be covering months that they're not receiving another rental assistance source for. The second question, if I understood it correctly, was about participating providers. So the participating provider is not, it won't, we're not giving funds out through participating providers, so there's not a risk of, oh, this provider ran out of funds. Rather, the tenant just applies through the online intake portal, and as those come in, they are assigned out to a participating provider. But all the payments and the tracking of the funding goes through IHCDA, and it's really kind of first come, first serve as individuals are deemed eligible through the pre-screening system. So the participating providers, there's not a situation where, oh, this particular CAP agency has a cap that they can only serve X number of people. That's not the way the program is structured.
It was mentioned that township trustee offices would assist in providing services. Have these offices already been notified of the program?
Yes, indeed. So we have talked with the Township Trustee Association, and they've gotten information out to the trustees throughout the state. There is no mandate. So in case I wasn't clear on the slide about participating providers, those types of organizations, the township trustee offices, the public housing agencies, and the community action agencies, they are the eligible participating providers, but they are not mandated to participate. Any organization that meets those qualifications was eligible to sign up. All those organizations have been notified. They've been given instructions on how to sign up to be a participating provider, and we continue following up with those organizations to continue increasing the number of providers throughout the state. So the trustees are aware of this. But it's up to them to choose whether or not to participate. Now, if a trustee does not choose to participate, that does not limit the ability of an individual to be served. If an individual signs up and is approved for the program, we will get them sent to the closest participating provider. But if there's not a direct provider right there, they'll just be sent to the next closest person. So it's not going to impact who is served, because realistically, most of this work is all going to be done virtually anyway.
Because we're running short on time, I'm going to just select a few more questions here. How does the community action agency become a provider?
Yeah, so any community action agency, public housing agency, or township trustee that wants to be a participating provider in the program just has to contact IHCDA. We have done webinars with all those different associations to explain the program and distributed information. There's just a one-page interest form that they submit to IHCDA to say, I'd like to be a provider, and then we will send them back a program agreement to execute. So if there's any organization that falls into that types of eligible providers, and they don't have the form, or they need more information, they should just reach out to IHCDA and we can answer those questions. We have set up an inbox specifically for this program. So please send questions to raf@ihcda.in.gov. And myself and a couple of my staff members monitor that email box, and we'll respond out as soon as possible to any inquiries that come in there.
Great. Can undocumented residents participate in this program?
In the Rental Assistance Fund program, yes.
Yes,
There
yes.
is no citizenship test in the Rental Assistance Fund program.
And to you, Pam, does Brightpoint assist with undocumented residents?
Yes. There is no stipulation on any of our local funds about residency, and for energy assistance, and most community actions agencies know this, there's a procedure in place for undocumented residents of a household on how to deal with that. So residency is not an issue.
Thank you. Let's see. What happens if a landlord refuses to accept rental assistance funds? Is there any mechanism to compel the landlord to accept the assistance?
Yeah, that's a good question, and unfortunately, there is not. And that is, I know some groups have raised that question, kind of related specifically to this program, but that really is a higher issue related to Indiana code, which, with the exception of some very specific federally funded projects that have federal restrictions, Indiana code does not require landlords to accept rental assistance, and in fact, most landlords in Indiana can just say we don't accept rental assistance. And we know that there's also state code that prohibits local jurisdictions from putting stricter requirements on. So there's no jurisdiction in Indiana that can force landlords to accept rental assistance. So that is a barrier, unfortunately, to the program. We have worked on landlord outreach engagement. We've been working with a variety of owner and developer groups. We've been working with the apartment association to get words out. We have one-pagers explaining the program to landlords. So we've been trying to get the word out on why they would want to participate in this program. But theoretically, a landlord could say, I'm just refusing to execute a lease addendum or to accept rental assistance, and IHCDA would not have the ability to compel.
The other thing this is Brand. Oh, sorry. I just want to comment really quickly on that, just to kind of, again, maybe help encourage landlords to participate in the program as well, which I appreciate Matt's comments there, is just that, we are working on in our office and training our attorneys. There are likely some equitable and contract defenses that we can equip tenants with, whether they're represented or whether we give them some pro bono or some pro se material. So, just an encouragement is that, tenants may still be able to raise it as an issue at an eviction hearing if a landlord refused to allow them to correct. So just to say, like, yeah, they may be able to deny it. It's just something that may come up, and we may try to get some material out there to get some courts to say that's a problem.
Great, thank you, Brandon. I think that's going to be all of our questions for now. On behalf of Prosperity Indiana, I want to thank each of you for participating in today's webinar, Indiana's Looming Housing Crisis. Again, we thank Fifth Third Bank and AARP Indiana for making this webinar possible. We appreciate our presenters, Matt, Brandon, and Pam, for their insights and answers to your questions. Please look for an email from me this afternoon inviting you to take a very brief survey. Your feedback is important as we use this information to enhance the quality of our webinars and training. Also, please check out our website, prosperityindiana.org, to view upcoming events and training for the remainder of July. Next Monday, July 13th, we will host a webinar, Introduction to Community Development, which will explore the fundamentals of community development. We will hear from a leader of a local community development corporation to see how these concepts are put into daily action. The webinar begins at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and registration is up on our website. Again, we appreciate your participation. This concludes our webinar, and thank you, everyone. Have a great day.